Okay, so you just bought a whole box of new fishing lures, but how do you know when and where to use each of them? That's our focus for today. Let's look at some different kinds of lures and when you should use each one. Let's start with the inline spinner since it's one of my all-time favorite lures. Inline spinners need to have the blade spinning around to be the most effective. They're best in open water, especially along the deep edge of vegetation, over the top of vegetation, or along the edge of the current in a river. Retrieve this one at a pretty constant rate and experiment with keeping it just under the surface or a few feet down. Most people use these for trout, bass, northern pike, and muskie. Next, let's talk about spinnerbaits. Spinnerbaits have a blade just like an inline spinner. Sometimes they have more than one blade, and it's held away from the bait on a frame like this. So if you're dragging it through aquatic plants, the plants come through here and they hit this frame, and it helps to deflect the plants away from hitting the hook. They're excellent baits to cast right through a sparse bed of vegetation or along the edge of a denser bed. They can also be bumped off of docks, stumps, logs, other woody structure. I like to use them when targeting bass, pike, and bowfin, especially in green or dirty water. Gold blades are usually the best in dirty water or on cloudy days, and silver blades are usually best in clear water or on sunny days. Alright, crankbaits. Crankbaits are awesome lures that are often extremely realistic, like these two flicker shads. The size and angle of the crankbait's lip in front determines how far it will dive. So a shallow diver like this has a short bill or a short lip on it. This one would probably dive to about 5 feet max. This one could probably go to 11 or 12 feet if you have a lot of line out. So obviously you want to use a deeper diver one where there's more water. If you have shallow water or a lot of vegetation a few feet under the surface, you'd probably want to go for a shallow diver like this one. These lures wobble back and forth and work best when they're retrieved near the bottom or near structure, but they're also really effective when trolling in open water for things like pike, muskie, or trout and salmon. Use a small ultralight crankbait like this one for big bluegills, crappies, perch, bass, or walleyes. A medium size like this size 7 flicker shad is great for bigger bass, walleyes, pike, and muskies. You'll even get an occasional catfish to hit one of these. Large crankbaits are great for muskies, big pike, and salmon. Play around with retrieving them quickly or slowly and try twitching them once in a while. They typically have 2 or more treble hooks, so you don't want to throw them where there's a ton of vegetation because they'll get snagged up all the time. Toss them near rock piles or in open water along the edges of vegetation or other structure, and use rattling crankbaits or bright colors when fishing in dirty water or in low light conditions. Alright, topwater baits. Topwater baits are killer for bass and pike and are best used near vegetation or structure where the water is at least 50 degrees or so. Tossing them right near shore often tricks a fish into thinking your lure is a frog or another animal that just jumped or fell into the water. A prop-style topwater bait like this Whopper Plopper produces a sound that's as fun to listen to as it is enticing to a bass. But get ready because a topwater strike is often really aggressive. The hardest part of topwater fishing is waiting a second or two after the strike to set the hook.
Got him!
Topwater frogs will give you some of the most fun you can have while fishing. You can throw these into the thickest, nastiest slop you can find, where other lures just can't even be used. Bass will often be hiding underneath and will slam the frog lure as you twitch it over the slop. I like to throw a frog with legs or tails where the vegetation is really thick all over the place, or if I've got an area where it's mixed heavy vegetation and open water, I'll use a frog with paddle feet so I can drag that through the open water and it makes a nice kicking sound. Underspins are jigs with a small spinner blade and some sort of a plastic trailer. You can switch out the trailer to go larger or smaller, or move from a grub style to another style like a minnow style. They're similar to a spinnerbait with this blade out here, but the blade runs underneath the lure, and they tend to be smaller. Use these where you see schooling baitfish and cast it right into the school. Underspins are fairly weedless too, so don't be afraid to bring it through some light vegetation or other structure. Retrieve it at a speed that keeps it pretty level in the water, but experiment with twitches or sudden increases or decreases in speed to see if you can entice a fish to strike. Alright, let's look at soft swim baits. These are some of the simplest lures, and they're pretty cheap too. They can range from a do-it-yourself jig and plastic grub to a special jig and plastic combo that's sold as one lure, like this Mimic Minnow or this Berkeley Shad swim bait. You'll be amazed at all the fish you can catch on such a simple lure. When I'm jigging for walleyes in the spring, a small swim bait is my first choice for bouncing along the bottom of the river. You just have to gently lift it and let it fall back down, and the walleyes love it. The single hook keeps it from getting snagged, so you can drop it over a bunch of rocks and things and usually don't get too many snags with it. Plus, it catches much more than just walleyes. You never know what you'll catch on one of these. A swim bait will do just as well on bass, muskies, and even carp and catfish. And they come in tons of different colors, styles, and weights. Use the big ones for pike and muskies, smaller ones for crappies, perch, and bass. In general, brighter colors are better in cloudy water, or more natural colors are good for clear water. Alright, spoons. Spoons are metal lures that produce a lot of flash and often have a lot of weight to them. They're common for casting from shore because they can be casted so far. They're generally used in open water away from heavy structure or vegetation because they tend to have treble hooks and get hung up easily, even if you switch the treble to a single hook. Some spoons are weedless and can use trailers like this timber doodle, so they're more versatile in where you can use them. But overall, count on using them in open water, bringing them back on a constant retrieve, or maybe twitching and jerking them now and then. You can also let them sink a ways and they still work pretty well. Most people target salmon, trout, and northern pike with spoons. Alright, chatterbaits are kind of like spinnerbaits with this big blade out front. But instead of the blade spinning around, it actually just moves side to side and slaps against the jig. So it makes a lot of vibration and also sends out a lot of flash from these blades. Some of them have weed guards here that deflect plants away from the hook tip. These are fairly weedless, so you can toss them into vegetation and bounce them off of brush piles or dock poles. You can even crawl these on the bottom and twitch them to make the blade vibrate a few times. You'll have the best luck with these when the water is warmer or dirty. I like to retrieve chatterbaits at the slowest speed that keeps them chattering, because I'm typically using them in dirtier water, and in these cases the fish have a harder time finding a bait. They're most often used for largemouth bass and spotted bass, but northern pike will take them too. I hope this helps you to figure out when to throw each of your new lures for the best results. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you next time.